All right, counting down. I believe we are live. Let me double check, but it looks like we're live, and that's good enough for me. Good enough for the girls I go out with. Yeah, here we go. All right, already got a bunch of people in the chat room. Hello, everybody. I'm Chris, your host of the Weekly Spinner Rack. Welcome to my show. We've got a few people in here. We've got Ricky Prickles, Hannah Kelsey, Super Laugh Hard, Andrew Jefferson, my sister Jean, Jeff Yun. Who else did we have here? We've got MF, Sean Ali. Excuse me, don't know where that is. You don't need to worry about getting the sickness through the camera. I'm pretty sure that is not how that works. There we go with Steve Sorensen. He's always here. Appreciate that. Hello, Daniel. Hello, Petamagia. Hello, Joe Dent. I know he's in the UK. We've got A-Man and Sir Mr. Howell, Dr. Settleton. Pretty sure I saw Jim Mahfood was already here. So we got a big gang. Jack Dawes. Lovely. This is fantastic. DCAM. Wonderful. Thank you so much, everybody, for being here. I just love to shout out some of the first people that come into the chat room, but hopefully this is still entertaining, even if you're watching it when it's not live. But if you show up when it is live, Mondays, 5 p.m. Pacific, got a chance to interact, and that's some of the fun. So, what do we do on the show? I'm going to review the comics that I read this week. I'm going to read and comment on the comic book-related news of the week, and I'm going to try to draw something. No, I'm not sick. I'm not sick at all. I'm aces. I'm all good. I'm all good. Don't worry. Gum? Andrew Jefferson with an early super chat just saying gum? To that I'll answer, no thank you. I'm good. Hello, Dr. Doom and Iron Shell and Robert Weichel, Riv Wilson, Connor, James Stewart, Cup Creations. Awesome. Awesome. Oh, no. Sheltering for a tornado warning. Cup, please. Well, I guess if you've got internet connection, it can't be quite that bad yet, I'm hoping. Take care of yourself. Hello, Aldi. All right, let's get into what I read this week. Not that much, especially compared to last week. Last week, I went cuckoo. But here's the book that's going for silly prices on eBay and places like that, bidding sites. It's a reprint of JLA Avengers by Kurt Busiek as writer, George Perez as artist. And folks, this is a beautiful reprint. Marvel and DC only agreed to do 7,000 copies, and the profits go to the Hero Initiative. That's a really great charity that Perez has always supported. I believe he's still on the board of directors. And, yeah, I mean, an older book, but one that's just pure fun. You know, we've got the Justice League of America and the Avengers, and sincerely, it features just about every character that's ever been a part of either team at the time that this came out. It's a fun little premise. You know, two cosmic guys, you know, battling or playing a game for supremacy of their dimension. One from the DC universe, one from the Marvel universe. It all boils down to each of them have to grab a bunch of important mystical items from each dimension. Leads to some pretty awesome fights. Steve Sorensen with a super chat saying, if you could bring back NBA Supersonics, would you? That's a yes or no, so I'll say yes. I think that would make a lot of people happy. Yeah, of course, yeah. Who doesn't want the Supersonics back? That would be nice to have a local team. I'm in the Seattle area. So, a great reprint. Here's why this is extra cool, though. You can read about this story. It's been out for a long time. You can still find the back issues. At the back here, they've got some things of where there was references to intercompany crossovers. They've got a whole article here on all the times Marvel and DC have had crossovers. And then, this is great, they talk about how in the 1982, Marvel and DC were about to do Justice League of America Avengers crossover, and how Perez started drawing it, but then it all fell apart. And this was previously compiled in the original hardcover version of this, but yeah, this reprint has it as well. it has all the pages that Perez drew for that original crossover, a little over 20 pages of art with a little bit of the script above it just to help guide you through it. So that is pretty awesome to have that. I had the original issues, but to actually have the original aborted story intact in this really makes this extra valuable. I was lucky. My retailer sold this to me at cover price. He got, I think, 7 copies, I want to say, and he sold them all at cover price. So that's pretty nice. It was just first come, first serve for reserving it. I was lucky enough to be, I think, the first person to reserve it at my particular store. Yeah, obviously 7,000 copies is not really a lot when so many people want it. It's a decent enough print run, but there's definitely more than 7,000 people that would like to read this. So I won't be surprised if there is another reprint at some point in the future that's maybe sort of bigger, maybe as a gimmick cover of some sort. I wouldn't be surprised. But for now, Marvel and DC sort of collaborated just to put out, a relatively small print run and get the profits to the Heroes Initiative. That's a great charity, by the way, folks, that, basically, if you have been a professional in the industry and you're falling on hard financial times, that's what the Hero Initiative does is, they help out for medical and living expenses, things like that for people that have been, on hard times. I know Russ Heath was a great creator who ended up taking advantage of their generosity. So great charity. Really, really cool. Here's the next thing that I picked up that came out this week. This seemed like a good jumping on point for Batman and Superman, since I'm really not keeping up with either of those titles. Written by Mark Waid, art by the incredible Dan Mora, relatively new artist in the industry. A reboot of World's Finest, which was a really long-running team-up book that DC had, and it's great. It looks great. It's just fun. This is just cool, big adventure stuff. Who wouldn't like it? What happens in this? Metallo injects Superman with red kryptonite. Who knows what it'll do to him? Basically ends up making his powers go out of control, and his buddy Batman has to do a bunch of detective work to try to get things under control before Superman hurts somebody inadvertently. It's pretty cool. Oh, and the Doom Patrol gets involved because who else would know about helping somebody whose powers have gone out of control other than Dr. Calder? So Batman brings him in. That makes a lot of sense. Looks gorgeous. Steve Sorensen with a generous super chat. That's very kind of you, Steve. Let's see. He says, my local comic book store, Play the Game, Read the Story. Oh, that's what it's called. Play the Game, Read the Story in Syracuse, New York. Gave me this at retail price. I was shocked that the store got 6 copies, and I was lucky to get one. That is lucky. That's great. These guys just do good superhero stuff. I don't know who could object to a book like this. If you're into superhero stuff, it's telling sort of a new story. It's just it's classic adventure stuff. It's got good characterization. It's got a little bit of a hook to a mystery of what's going on with this one. Yeah, it's awesome. A lot of books I get these days, I get for the creative team. I will admit that. I don't really follow a character anymore. I follow creators that I care about, and I really like Dan Mora's art, so this was a fun one to get a hold of. Isn't it interesting? Maybe this would make a good Comic Tropes episode, to track back when artists started drawing like the seams of costumes, to add it that little bit of extra detail to say no, these aren't naked people we're drawing with some lines over them to show that they've got a costume. We're putting in actual stitching and stuff. I wonder when that started. Certainly Jim Lee was a fairly early guy to add that detail, but I wonder if there was somebody before him that inspired him. That would just sort of be interesting to look at. Anyway, I do recommend this. It's a good jumping on point. It doesn't have to talk about any sort of continuity that's going on in either title. Thank goodness. That would have left me in the dust. I've been picking up this comic from Dynamite. This is the only thing I'm regularly picking up from Dynamite, but that's because Invincible Red Sonja, again, doesn't have crossovers or deal with what's been going on in previous titles. It's just its own story. Written by Amanda Connor and Jimmy Palmiotti, and these covers by Amanda are always gorgeous. She's an incredible artist, but she's also a really good writer. Kind of funny, some tongue-in-cheek stuff in this story. Artwork by Moritat. He draws beautiful women. What, in a way, what more do you need for a Red Sonja book? Ideally you do want somebody with good storytelling, like good at action and stuff like that. And I would say this fits the bill. I would look at this and say there's a bit of an open line style that I associate with French and Belgian comics to a degree, or even Italian, but they've sort of been influenced by the same things. The central premise here, Red Sonja is protecting a princess and a prince from two different kingdoms that were betrothed, and they got betrayed by a sorcerer. For a while, Red Sonja was immortal, and so she got hurt very badly, like killed a bunch of times. That is now worn off, so she's in exceptional danger. It's fun. I don't know that this is everybody's cup of tea, but I have been enjoying it. It's got great artwork. It's got a fun story. Like I say, when you've got a character like this that runs around in a metal bikini, you can sort of either ignore that and try to just go for hardcore adventure, or you can play into the fact that it's a little ridiculous. And Red Sonja honestly loses her clothes a fair amount in this. Not that it has nudity. It's all sort of tongue-in-cheek and suggestive. In this, she gets back a chainmail bikini. She's pretty excited about that. Don't worry, they explained that it has rabbit fur lining. So otherwise, I think that would be pretty painful. I'm pretty sure that's a joke Dave Sim made in Cerebus. Daniel, welcome. Yeah, that was Invincible Red Sonja. Yes, Adam. Let's see. Next up, last issue of X Lives of Wolverine. What do I sort of pick up? I pick up a lot of miniseries that aren't necessarily tied into the main continuity of things, just so that I can get a taste of what's going on. This was fine. It was good. I liked X Lives of Wolverine more than I liked X Deaths of Wolverine. The storyline, how do I put this simply? Wolverine's enemy, Omega Red, has been sent back through time to try to kill either Charles Xavier or Charles Xavier's ancestors at 10 different points in the past. Wolverine has had his mind sent back to his younger selves to protect him. And this is the final issue where Omega Red turns against the mutant who's been sending him through time. That is Mikhail Rasputin. That's Colossus and Illyana's evil brother. But the story isn't quite over by the end here, because as it ends, it ties into what's been happening in the concurrent series X Deaths of Wolverine that has a Wolverine from the future putting mutants in danger. So, now Wolverine has to fight himself. That could be fun. Look at that. I wasn't too into Donny Cates' take on Hulk. I wanted to be, but I really wasn't. I kind of bailed on that one. But I'd be lying if I said that I didn't love Ryan Ottley's artwork. I think it's always exciting. He's a really talented artist. That's a cool ad. Man, I used to love Marvel house ads right around the 80s, and that's probably just nostalgia talking, but I can... And DC, now that I think of it. The ads for their upcoming comics would always hook my interest. And I guess that's because you would not hear any online news stories about anything coming up. The only place you could really hear about it is maybe going to a convention and hearing a panel, or looking at an ad. So you would pore over those ads and look for clues or details about what it could be about. Joe Dent says, speaking of European-style comics, I've just started on the first Lucky Luke. I've always heard good things about Lucky Luke. I have not read it, but I've always heard that it's cool. Let's see. Black Phoenix says that the X Lives of Wolverine series was painful. It's whatever. It's whatever. It ultimately, it was fine for what it was. I can't strongly recommend it, but it's fine. Refrigerator Full of Heads, almost over. I said last time I reviewed this that it's sort of a disappointing sequel to Basket Full of Heads. I'm not putting Rio Ewers down because I don't think that this is bad, but Joe Hill created a story that was much more of a menacing horror story, and this is a little more over the top. Guess what? This issue embraces that. That's what it needed to separate itself. This is like almost over, but it finally got good again. We've got a nearly dead, like a guy that was cut in half. He is a criminal. He comes back with this Norse magic that turns him into a gigantic snake, and he starts destroying the gang that was working for him. It's total over-the-top anarchy, but honestly, that's what this needed to separate itself from the much more grounded horror of the original. And it ends with, this isn't a spoiler, just like one of the main characters has hooked up a shark's head that's still alive because of, Norse magic and stuff. She's chained it to the front of her car and is tearing after the villain. Sorry, that's pretty cool. That's what this book needed to be its own thing, is to really just embrace that over-the-top campiness. And so I ended up having a blast with this issue. After I was kind of ready to bail on it from issue 4, I was just like, it's not going anywhere fast enough for me. Ultimately, I'm always going to pick a Joe Hill comic over just about anybody else's take on that material, at least when it comes to his sort of Hill House comics. Sorry, I like Joe Hill's writing the most. But this is fun. This was fun. Kind of late to jump into it, but if you read Basket Full of Heads and you want a little bit more of that universe, okay, issues 3 and 4, a little slow, picks back up here. People have been recommending that I read JoJo's Bizarre Adventure for almost as long as I've been doing the channel. I read the first trade paperback, or tankobon, whatever you want to call it, and I didn't love it. I'll be honest, I did not love it. The artwork is kind of weird. I like this second issue a bit more. I can't claim that I'm a huge fan of it, but I did get more invested in the story in this. Lord Luke Lightbringer asks, what's your top 5 indie comic book series you'd like to see in a live action or animated series or movie? Let's see. Cool question. Usagi Yojimbo. That would be a cool animated one. Even though Ninja Turtles has been done many times, I would like to see another take at like a live action Ninja Turtles that's just a little more authentic to the comics. Obviously, both of those are sort of from the 80s. I'm trying to think, like, do we count stuff like, Image and Dark Horse as indie? Generally, I kind of don't, but, well, I'll tell you what, we've got a cool guy in here, Jim Mahfood, who has a really cool series called Girl Scouts. I think that would actually make a cool live-action show, like a streaming show, a limited series. My opinion, Jim. That could be cool. Last week I talked about Radiant Black. I sincerely think that this would be fantastic, either animated or live action. This is really cool. What else is indie that I would love to see adapted? I got to come up with one more, don't I? How about a good take on Hellboy again? So anyway, all I can say is the second story arc, at least you sort of know what to expect now. It's this is an over-the-top series in terms of the violence and stuff like that, and the weird supernatural stuff. Maybe now that I'm conditioned for that, I kind of appreciated Volume 2 a bit more. The story picks up in a big way, and I've already got the sort of somewhat boring background of the characters out of the way. Like the villain, Dio Brando, he's like comically evil. He wants to rule the world and slaughter people. It's over the top. And like the hero, Jonathan Joestar, is like ridiculously noble. But the backgrounds, and it's probably an assistant, the backgrounds are great. The characters sometimes are a little bit more normal. They're super buff, like super over the top. That said, the artist still draws them in some really awkward poses sometimes. I'm trying to think of exactly what to say. Like just sort of this swinging on a hook, but sticking the arm down here. it is some pretty weird, awkward art. Jerf E with an interesting super chat question. Let me interrupt this. What's my favorite line of toys? I've been thinking about DC's Superpowers line a lot recently via Jack Kirby. You know what? It's going to be G.I. Joe. Yep, G.I. Joe is my favorite. I love G.I. Joe. Steve Sorensen with a super chat saying, JoJo picks up Believe Me. I recommend sticking with it. The first part, Phantom Blood, is a parody of Fist of the North Star. I was just about to talk about that. And then Joseph Joestar kicks the series into high gear, but Dio comes back. Okay, well, a little bit of a... Girl Scouts has a live-action short on here from about 6 years ago. Yeah, good point, Kale. Worth mentioning. Oh, Bone! Somebody says Bone is in development at Netflix. I don't know why I didn't think of that. Bone would be fantastic. Concrete would be an interesting one. That was a Dark Horse book. Concrete would be interesting, but Bone is fantastic. I adore Bone. I don't know why I didn't think of that. Any Naoki Urasawa book would be a really cool animation. Well, the cool thing, Robert, is a bunch of his stuff has been adapted. There's a live-action version, a trilogy of movies for 20th Century Boys. It's not bad. And there is a very long anime adapting Monster, but I'd love to see Pluto adapted. Unless it has been, and I don't know about it, but Pluto, oof. Anyway, this issue really showed me how over-the-top things would be, because your main character here, he's had several ribs broken and an arm broken. He's falling down like 3 flights of a house, and while he's falling, he grabs this piece of metal, jams it in the wall, it sticks, he swings up and jumps off of it, and then he still isn't quite going to reach the bad guy, so he rips off his belt while he's jumping up and uses that to, like, latch around his villain's leg. Weird! Also, I don't quite understand why the characters in here are named after rock bands. Like, the villain is named Dio. I assume that's after Ronnie James Dio. The titular character, Jonathan, meets a mentor who's called Zeppeli, and that's like as in Zeppelin, Led Zeppelin. What else? Oh, the main character's... sidekick, you could call it, is this sort of noble thug. I'm trying to find a picture of him. But his name is REO Speedwagon. What? It's weird. I have to read up on that to understand why he does that. But the last super chat from Steve does point out something that I definitely saw in this. Once it like gets into all this over-the-top action, is I was getting huge vibes of Fist of the North Star. And honestly, that's a really influential manga, Fist of the North Star. Post-apocalyptic, just huge, buff, roided out guys getting into fights where, like, you know, their punches just obliterate muscle and bone. It's just a naming gimmick, but it persists through, like, for 30 years. Good lord. Weird gimmick. Weird gimmick. I guess the creator is just a fan of classic rock. Yeah, that's all I came up with. Weird. That's a weird way to pronounce awesome. So, okay, people love this, right? The manga author loves American culture. Okay. Well, I guess I'll just have to stay with this. Here's what I will say. Issue 2 got me more invested. I'll keep reading. I know people are passionate about this series, and even if I don't love it, I want to read it so that I can have an informed take at some point. I'll probably do an episode about JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, or at least on Hirohiko Araki. Using bands as names is an Araki trope. Yes, punny names. And of course a lot of writers do that, so I get it. I'll stick with it. I don't think I'll ever be a massive fan of the artwork. It's not bad, but sometimes I'd be hard-pressed to find an exact page where but there are pages where I do get a little confused about the panel-to-panel storytelling. And that's definitely a little bit of a pet peeve when I'm like, wait, what? What's happening? I'm all for super over-the-top violence and stuff. Berserk is one of my favorite comics ever. I got so into Berserk. It still breaks my heart that we'll never really get an official conclusion to that story. I love Berserk. So, I can't get more Berserk, so stuff like Fist of the North Star and JoJo's Bizarre Adventure will have to do. Alright, not everybody reads manga, so I probably talked about that too long. Just show you a couple little back issues that I picked up that I got at good prices. An issue of Captain America where he first gives up being Captain America. He becomes Nomad. That was pretty cool. This was Sal Buscema on the artwork, and he does a really good job. Sal is underrated. I picked up this, which is the first time the Illuminati got together, which I just imagined could go up in value once Doctor Strange 2 comes out, and I didn't want to pay a fortune. I just have never read this. But this is like, sort of all the big brains and the leaders in the Marvel hero universe, sort of, they secretly meet sometimes just to exchange information and to prevent big disaster. So that's cool. Oh yeah, I've read Monster. Monster by Naoki Urasawa is brilliant. Brilliant. You'll never hear me say something completely negative about Naoki Urasawa. He's literally one of, if not my absolute favorite creators. I just love his storytelling. He takes his time and he builds characters that I care about, and I'm not going to lie, more than once I have cried reading a Naoki Urasawa comic, usually towards the end, like when there's a lot of history built up between the characters and stakes are really, really high for them. Last book I'll mention that I picked up, cool hardcover, Punisher by, was it Alan Grant? Or Stephen Grant? Stephen Grant, excuse me, Stephen Grant. But artwork by Mike Zeck. I love Mike Zeck artwork, folks. There's just not enough of it out there. In my opinion, this is him sort of at his peak. So, yeah, this is just cool. A cool one-shot Punisher story with one of the best Punisher artists on it. Nothing too fancy. Meat and potatoes, but it's good. It's real good. It is a great book. So, I've got some news of the week that I will read to you, and I've laid out a loose sketch here for what I'm going to draw today. Apparently, it's the upcoming anniversary of Death's Head. That's a Marvel UK creation. Well, obviously Marvel UK didn't create it, and artists created it. Simon Furman, I want to say, is the writer who created this character, Death's Head. A robot bounty hunter or a cyborg bounty hunter. And what's cool about this character is he was first created as an enemy for the Transformers, for stories involving the Transformers. And then, since Marvel UK, but Marvel owned it, they then used him in a Doctor Who story when they had the rights to tell Doctor Who stories. And then he's crossed over into the Marvel Universe proper, like, Fantastic Four and stuff. So there's not many characters you could say anything like that about. Like a character who has met the Transformers, the Doctor, and Marvel superheroes. Yeah, this is Death's Head 1. That's the one I prefer. He's funnier. It's dark, but it's funny. So, yeah, let me give a shot at what I can do with this guy. And I'll pull up the news of the week, because that's an important part of this. Yeah, I think that there's some really interesting news to talk about. Let's see what I should start with. Love it when I get into a work so much it makes you cry. I agree, Mandela Butterfly. I agree. And that's not super common for comics. Let's see here. News. News that you can use. Oh! Alright. So, Marvel Comics #1 from 1939. There was a 9.2 graded copy that went up for auction with Comic Connect this past week. It sold, let me get the exact number, $2.4 million. Just bonkers. Wow. $2.4 million. Can you imagine? That is up there. I guess that there's a few comics that have gone for more, but not a lot. Apparently just, the exact buyer isn't revealed, but it's a 40-something guy that lives outside of the U.S. is all they could tell us in the news. Wow. Somebody's got money. Somebody's got money. That issue, Marvel Comics #1, that's when they were going by Timely. And, of course, they kind of named themselves Marvel Comics after the importance of that comic. It featured the first appearances of the Human Torch, although not the one from the Fantastic Four. The original was an android. But he looks the same, like when he's the Human Torch. And he's called the Human Torch. And that's what the Vision's body was based on. Like, in continuity, they built the Vision off of the Human Torch's android body. And also Namor the Submariner. That's a great character. So, yeah. But can you imagine having that kind of money? Where you just, like, I love comics. But I'd have to have a lot of money before I could be like, yeah, I'll spend $2.4 million on one. Because at the end of the day, then it's a piece of artwork. It's not like food or a car, something that you can sort of use in your day-to-day life. So, wow. Just wow. So much money. Lord Luke Lightbringer with another super chat asking, what's your thought on the Lady Death comic book series and the animated movie? I've never read either. Or I've never read the comic. I've never seen the movie. So my knowledge of Lady Death is next to none. Yeah, I don't think I know. I mean, I know what she'd look like. I could identify her in a police lineup. That's about it. I mean, that was part of the early 90s bad girl art popularity. But as far as what her story is or who's written and created her and drawn her and all that, sorry, I just don't know anything about it. James Stewart with a super chat saying, really enjoyed your Comic Tropes episode this week. Thank you. I got into comics in the early 90s, so it brought back a lot of memories. I figured it would be nostalgic for a fair amount of people. It certainly was for me. Yeah, look, I am pretty much the last person that's going to complain about gimmick covers. Now, what they did to the industry at the time wasn't great. So, like, there is stuff we can learn from them. But I thought they looked cool. I loved gimmick covers. I loved those, like, holograms and foil and all that stuff. I thought it was fantastic. No complaints there. So, my look back at that piece of history was definitely done with a lot of love. And, I mean, I think gimmicks, like, there's not many these days. There are variants these days. There's not lots of gimmicks, but, what I did, where was one? Yeah, here it is. Hold on. I'm getting something. I've shown this once before, and I'm not doing this to necessarily just, wash your car, Jim, if you're still in the chat. But Jim Mahfood made this a pop-up comic book, which isn't exactly like a gimmick cover, but it sort of is like almost like a gimmick comic because it's just not something that people do. Look at how gorgeous this is. I don't know how much of the dimensions you all can get with the top-down view, but trust me, this is a beauty. This is just a thing of absolute beauty. So I like gimmicks. I like gimmicks a lot. They can, as long as they're well executed. Let me just leave it there. As long as they're well executed. And I think that there were Silver Surfer number 50, where Silver Surfer is silver. That's a good gimmick. Ghost Rider glowing in the dark. That's a good gimmick. They are appropriate for the character. Something like Fantastic Four 375, it just has a, hollow foil type background. What's the point? What's the point other than to bump up the price and sort of get some more money out of me? So I don't love that. Bullet hole one is funny. Yeah, the bullet hole ones are funny. Would the recent Bruno Redondo Nightwing issue be a gimmick? I wouldn't call that a gimmick, Andrew, because it's just a different way of telling a story, which that's part of why I love comics. They're so versatile. You can tell a story in so many different ways. If the Nightwing comic had, something that a typical comic doesn't, like glow in the dark, hologram, pop-up, something like that, that would be a gimmick. But it was still a standard, comic book. It had a normal cover. It had a normal page count. Nothing folded out or anything. So I would not call that, that was just a storytelling technique. So yeah, anyway, just my opinion. Maybe somebody else could argue something different, but that's my take. I'll pick up another piece of news. Bunch of new people in. Hello to Legion of Comics. Hello, No. Love that. Come on, keep coming in. Oh, Gold Key Comics is coming back. Gold Key. All right, who is Gold Key? Well, Gold Key was a publisher that was pretty big from about 1962 to 1984 was probably the last time they really published anything. And they were mostly known for licensed comics. They did Disney comics forever. They did stuff like Star Trek. What else did they do that was notable? They did create a bunch of their own characters. Turok Dinosaur Hunter, Solar, Man of the Atom, Magnus Robot Fighter. Those are all characters that Valiant later licensed when they launched their superhero universe. Those were not owned by Valiant. Those were licensed. And Gold Key is coming back. It's not I don't think they have any real intellectual property left, but there's the branding, the name. And so 4 guys, just investors that love comics, have bought the rights to Gold Key, which is still remembered by plenty of people, and they are actually taking submissions. So if you were looking for who out there is taking submissions, apparently Gold Key is. So they've got a website up, and you can check that out on your own time and get a sense if they might be the right ones for you in your book. But yeah, Gold Key is coming back. I thought that was interesting. I liked World's Finest quite a bit. Yeah, talked about, thank you for the super chat, Legion of Comics. I talked it up as definitely a recommend. Liked it a lot. Good, solid meat and potatoes superhero storytelling. That's what I called it. I think that's what I said. What other news do we have? We've got all sorts of news. 2000 AD celebrates 45 years next weekend. That's so cool. 2000 AD is awesome. I wish I knew more about it, to be honest, but everything I've looked at is so cool. Rogue Trooper, Judge Dredd, just great characters. Just great. So there are rumors that that Marvel Studios is planning on rebooting Daredevil. Not just sort of saying that the Netflix stuff is canon. Obviously, they've brought Charlie Cox as Daredevil into the MCU. He had an appearance. They brought in Kingpin, played by Vincent D'Onofrio. He's canon. They haven't necessarily acknowledged that the Netflix series is canon to the movies. I don't think they will, to be honest. So I do believe these rumors of a reboot. Those come from a trade publication. What's the name of it? Just an industry thing that lists ongoing productions. It's called Production Weekly. Yeah, not necessarily too exciting in and of itself. But, the rumor is that they're rebooting Daredevil. Obviously, Charlie Cox is still there. As to, any of the other actors that were part of it, don't know yet. So that will be interesting to learn. whether they're going to like recast those roles or what storylines they would tell. I'm not totally against this idea. I liked... Daredevil was my favorite of the Netflix shows, by far. By far. But if it could be integrated just a little bit more with the Marvel Universe, that would be a pretty cool thing for Daredevil. I do think Daredevil benefits from being in the Marvel Universe. If he could meet some of the more grounded heroes, like Spider-Man again, or certainly... who else? Maybe, like Sam Wilson, Captain America, somebody like that. I think that would be pretty cool. That would be interesting. Yeah, the Netflix series are now on Disney Plus, at least here in America. Hey, look who's here! Folks, Matt Draper is in here. His Daredevil sense went off. He heard me mention Daredevil, and that's his one superpower. When he hears Daredevil, he appears there to make sure that nobody is copying his essays or anything, because every December Matt Draper has a great YouTube channel where he does essays every week on an aspect of Daredevil, and there's a lot to say about Daredevil. A great character, just great, man. In fact, Frank Miller probably does get enough credit, but he really did reinvigorate that character to a huge degree, because before that, Daredevil was very much, in my opinion, Matt may disagree, a bit of a ripoff of Spider-Man. Yes, he had different powers, different career, but his personality was kind of like a real jokester at first. Steve Sorensen with a super chat saying, Future Shock is a 2000 AD documentary on IMDb TV. Thanks, Steve. That's really nice of you to point out to everybody. And JoJo above that says Shang-Chi would work really well with Daredevil. That's a good point. Grounded sort of characters like that do work better with Daredevil. Darecember. See, a bunch of people know about that. Yeah, I love it. Thanks for stopping by, Matt. Really respect Matt. Jealous of his editing. Not gonna lie. And he just great essayist. Obviously, we sort of approach a lot of comic book YouTube in a somewhat similar way in terms of neither of us are really doing episodes that just recap an episode, right? Like that's definitely a certain type of thing within the world of comic book YouTubes. Maybe I'm flattering myself. I would just say that I'll at least say that my goal is to do a little bit what I consider Matt doing, essays on comics. And my angle is usually a little bit more on the techniques and history of an artist or a writer. But Matt really does an excellent job of explaining to people what works in certain runs, what works and what doesn't. Did anyone at the theater whisper, "That's Daredevil" at the last Spider-Man movie? Thanks for the plug. Hey, thanks for the super chat. Hey, looks like somebody's eating tonight. This guy. $1.99. What's on the $1.99 menu? I'm eating. Lord Luke Lightbringer asks, who'd win in a fight, Constantine versus Doctor Strange or Dr. Fate versus Doctor Strange? I gotta give both to Doctor Strange. Constantine is clever. So look, he can be a lot more devious than Doctor Strange. He might get an early upper hand, but if he doesn't basically just take Doctor Strange out, Doctor Strange is a lot smarter, in my opinion, and has access to a lot more powerful magics that are not going to screw him or anybody else over. And Dr. Fate is interesting. I don't think he's ever been developed as well as Doctor Strange, and that's saying something because I don't think that Doctor Strange has that many great storylines either. But I'd still personally give the edge to Doctor Strange. Interesting question. It feels like I'm just beating up on DC. But no, I feel like some character has to be the best at something, right? If you say that anybody is faster than the Flash, you're like, no, bullshit. That's his one thing. He was basically the first guy to just be fast. Anything related to speed, you got to give it to him. Is somebody, more powerful overall than Superman? That's kind of bullshit too. Certain characters are just sort of iconic representations of something, and I'd say that Doctor Strange is that for magic. I think he got in there first. He got in there and did it the best. Anyway, not the first magical character, but the first big one. Constantine could easily con those silly superheroes. You know what? It's all up to the writer, isn't it? It's all up to the writer. Constantine is far more wily and would use underhanded tactics for the greater good. I don't know if he'd use it for the greater good or for, the greater, self-preservation. Interesting question. Could be fun. I'll tell you something. We talked at the beginning about Marvel DC crossovers briefly when I reviewed the JLA Avengers, which is great. But I'll tell you, an example of them not being great, some people love it, but I did not think that the Marvel versus DC was great. Where readers could vote on the outcome of 6 different battles. I feel like they chose wrong in a bunch of things. I don't really buy that Batman could beat Captain America. I don't beat that Wolverine could beat Lobo. But even if you just say no, come on, if it's written well, of course they can. You're right. If it's written well, the Wolverine versus Lobo fight, they both start fighting in one panel and tumble over behind a bar. You hear a sound effect, and then Wolverine stands up and he's like, I did it. He's smoking a cigar. I did it. I beat him. How? How did you beat Lobo? Lobo comes back from the dead. Hey, look who's here. Hooded Cobra Commander 788, my good friend. Nice to see you, buddy. I see you are drawing Skull Cow Man. You're correct. You're not wrong. You are correct. Skull Cow Man. How about Amalgam? Amalgam was kind of fun. Amalgam I'm not against. The fights one I thought was poorly executed. But the Amalgam thing I did have fun with. That's kind of good superhero comics. It's just having fun with the idea. What can you do? You're going to just put all the toys in the sandbox and say, go nuts. What can you do with them? So Amalgam I had fun with, Versus I did not. I wanted to, but I didn't really care for it at the time, and as I've gotten older, I care for it even less. Favorite Amalgam title? That is a tough question. Mostly because of my memory at this point. That was something like 92, wasn't it? We're talking 30 years ago. I remember Bat Thing by Larry Hama was underrated. Everyone remembers Spider Boy. That one was fun. Doctor Strange Fate had great artwork by Kevin Nolan, as I recall. That's cool. There was one that Jose Garcia Lopez did, maybe more than one, but he might have done Bat Thing. He might have done Bat Thing. Some of them, like Super Soldier and Dark Claw, I felt like were just a little too obvious. Not bad. Anyway. 97? It might have been 97? That's fair. I don't know exactly. Let's see. MF says there's a Humble Bundle going on right now for the Hero Initiative featuring Saga, Paper Girls, Rat Queens, Lady Mechanica, and more. Wow. Humble Bundles are a good way to get a bunch of comics at a good price, and if it's going to a charity like the Hero Initiative, that sounds worth looking into. Let's see what else I've got for news while I struggle with my artwork, because I don't feel like this is coming out great, but whatever. I've never drawn this character before, so it's kind of tough. You know what? Let me talk about something a little serious for a minute, guys. This is a piece of news, and a lot of people on my social media and my channel were asking me to comment, and I'll have a small comment here. because it does relate to this week, I talked about variant covers and gimmick covers. I think a lot of you guys know that I like the channel Cartoonist Kayfabe. I think that Ed Piskor and Jim Rugg are very talented guys, very insightful. Anyway, the short version is there's a book that Ed does called Red Room. It's supposed to be like, a horror comic, like real trashy exploitative stuff, talking about like snuff rooms where people are getting killed for money. People online watch. That's fine. I don't mind it for what it is. I think it's fun. I like horror stuff. And his pal Jim Rugg has been doing a lot of variant covers for it. Most of them cool sort of homage parodies of famous books, mostly indie books. Like he did like a cool parody of Zap with like, art by Robert Crumb. Like he did a cool parody of that, Zap #1. He did a cool homage parody of, I was about to say Strangers in Paradise. That's not what I mean to say. Love and Rockets. Love and Rockets. Very cool stuff. This week, he did one that was parodying Mouse. And the reaction was not great. Because as you can imagine, Mouse is telling... I'm trying to be very careful with how I say this because I understand what happened here. And I don't want to like throw anybody under the bus. But I don't think it was great. Mouse is telling a true story about survivors of the Holocaust. It's a semi-fictionalized account, but it's based on Art Spiegelman's family's history. That's a very sensitive subject, as you can imagine. I think that does carry more weight and should be looked at differently. I don't think it's off limits to parody, first of all, but when the source parody is a torture comic, you're exploiting a real-life tragedy for like something kind of intentionally trashy and exploitative. It wasn't a great look. To Jim's credit, he pretty much immediately retracted it. He pulled it. And Fantagraphics and Jim issued a statement. They literally said they apologize. They acknowledged their mistake. I think that's the right thing to do. We're moving forward. It didn't even get published, okay? I don't know. I would have liked to have seen Ed comment on it, since it is his comic as well. To my knowledge, he hasn't. He didn't do the art, Jim did, but I don't know. I would have liked to have seen him say something. Maybe I'm making more of this than it deserves, in fact. But it's news. I always talk about the comic book related news of the week. It was in there, and I had an opinion, and I wanted to share it. I think ultimately Jim and Fantagraphics did the right thing. I am surprised that in the editorial process, nobody suggested that this wasn't the way to go. And there's a lot of people out there that are saying, like, no, it shouldn't be off limits. But you know what? I mean, this was Jim's personal decision. Nobody forced him to do it. So you got to support that, right? I mean, Jim said he realized, hey, I made a bad call on this one. So I respect Jim for stepping up so quickly and, in my opinion, doing what he could to correct and mitigate it. It was unfortunate, in my opinion. It really hurt to see that happen, because I do like those guys quite a bit. Hopefully, what's done is done, and everyone can move on now. We'll see. Rugg seems like a decent guy. I think he probably just had an idea and didn't think about the implications. I think that's pretty much right, JoJo. I think that you're right. He was... Jim was parodying a lot of independent things, and he may have just been sort of in a bit of a bubble there, where he was like thinking like, hey, what else is popular that I can do a creative idea on. I don't think he intentionally meant any harm. I really don't. I sincerely don't. Should he have? Yeah, but as soon as he realized that, that's when he corrected. It changed his mind on what would be released. So I think Jim did the right thing ultimately. Everybody can make mistakes like that. It's unfortunate, but I don't think it should necessarily be any more of a big deal than what I've just commented on. To me, case closed at this point. We'll see. We'll see. Obviously, a lot of people have a lot of comments on something so charged emotionally. But I don't see how you could say, like, if I have an opinion, that's one thing. But, if a Jewish guy had an opinion, that's a very different story. And I want to respect that. Yeah, I think that's enough. Let me move on to another story. Because I don't want to, just sort of, turn anything too negative or anything like that. People are going to have different opinions. I think the right thing was ultimately decided. Here's an interesting one that has also a little bit of a mistake in it. So DC is riding high off of the success of the Batman. It's doing very well, right? No surprise. It's Batman. And they announced that Paul Dano will be... He played the Riddler in the new movie, if you didn't know. Paul Dano himself will be writing a Riddler comic. Now, one mistake I want to mention is there were a bunch of news articles, press releases and stuff, and they didn't mention at first who the artist was in any of the headlines. Well, obviously Paul Dano didn't draw it himself either, right? Presumably there was an artist involved. So DC, maybe it's not DC's fault completely. Maybe it's some of these news organizations that should know better. If you run a comic book news site, I think you should know to include, at a minimum, the artist and writer in the brief, in the headline. I know you can't include every single creative person, but let's include the two that start the project. That said, it's interesting. So Paul Dano is going to write a Riddler Year One comic book explaining the backstory of the character that he played. Huh. I do think that Paul Dano is a very talented actor. I am not familiar with any of his writing, but this is sort of an out-of-continuity thing that sounds to me like an interesting project. If that could draw in a new reader, they were like, hey, I loved the movie. One of the guys involved in the movie, wrote about their own character. I'm curious about that. That seems like a good idea to me. 6-issue series, bi-monthly. I think it starts in June. Andrew Jefferson said, hey, Chris, I noticed you and Batman have never been in the same room before. Thank you for noticing, Andrew. Look, have I been working out? Obviously. Do I look like Bruce Wayne? It has been said. But let me be the first to say, no, there's Batman. There's the perspective. Here's Batman. Here's me. Clearly, we are two different people. Very flattering. Batman definitely works out, takes care of himself. I am not Batman. I am Chris. And my superhero identity was Omega. Not as cool. Has Paul Dano written anything else? Great question, James. I did a quick search. I didn't see really anything. Maybe. Yeah, it is interesting, isn't it? How sometimes just being in this, being an actor, can get you other opportunities. But I hope he makes the best of it. You never know. What if he knocks it out of the park and then keeps writing comics? That would be interesting. So we shall see. We shall see. If they were giving him the monthly Batman title, I'd be like, that seems like a bit much. There's some other guys that have paid their dues. But if they want to make a sort of a mini-series based on the movie with involvement from one of the people from the movie, I don't think that's a bad idea. We'll see. We'll see how good it is when it comes out. That's something I would probably check out at least the first issue of and review on this show. Will it be as bad as the Danny DeVito Penguin comic? Is that out already? Because I have not read that. That's true. That's a good point. Danny DeVito also wrote a Penguin story for a DC anthology. I didn't know that came out yet. Oh, look at this. A super chat. Atomic Hound. Nice to meet you. Thank you for the super chat. Love the variant covers video. Thank you. Beyond the floppies, Marvel is also now going with variant dust jackets on omnibus editions. I did not know that. I'll be honest, that is not something I came across, so that's interesting. Marcilio Braz says, greetings from Brazil. Obrigado. Thank you very much. I'd love to visit Brazil sometime. Someday I hope to go to the CCXP convention down in Rio. We'll see. Thank you for jumping in, and that's really nice. There's an artist, Daniel Hayter, Daniel HDR, from Brazil. Great artist. He's been supportive of my channel since very close to the beginning. He's drawing, I should say, a Batman title these days. Really talented Brazilian artist. Casual Comics channel covered the Danny DeVito comic and it was bad. Oh, so it did come out. Oops. Okay. Are you into custom toys, action figures at all? No, Iron Shell, I wouldn't say that I am. You know what I mean, like making them myself? No, that's not something I've really... You know what, I think briefly I repainted some, but we're talking back in like maybe the late 90s or something like that. I think I was getting some of those Toy Biz X-Men figures, and my sister's in here. Jean, am I remembering correct that I repainted one of them to look like Ash from Evil Dead? I feel like I did that. I had to have done that. Come to Brazil. Are you from Brazil as well, Mandela? I didn't know that. I will someday. I definitely will. Chrissy and I had tickets to go to Brazil right before COVID hit. We had tickets to go to two places. We had tickets to go to Australia, and we had tickets to go to Brazil. Obviously, both of those fell apart. And now it's been 2 years of me just getting tremendously bored because we love to travel. It hurts. Supreme Omega. I like that name. Hope you're doing well. Thoughts on Tom DeFalco's time as editor-in-chief? Did people like his time as editor-in-chief? Because he doesn't have the notoriety of Shooter or Cassara. Yeah, you're right. You know, I guess I'd call his time there sort of workmanlike. And I like a lot of Tom DeFalco's writing. Yeah, I can't think of any, like, big things that happened during his time as editor-in-chief off the top of my head. Obviously, there had to have been. There had to have been. I can't think of anything off the top of my head. Kind of, that's an interesting observation. Interesting observation. Because, yeah, you think of guys like Bob Harris or I'm sorry, like editor-in-chief, like Bill Jemas and Shooter. Yeah. Interesting. Oh, you're from Florida. Okay. I did. Oh, my sister confirmed. I guess I did at one point. Yeah, I thought I did, but I wasn't quite remembering. I was like, did I just think about doing that, or did I do it? She says, yeah, I did repaint some sort of X-Men figure into Ash from Evil Dead. I think I also... I think what I did was I also painted... I want to say Omega Red as Evil Ash, but I didn't really know how to use, like, clays and putties to sort of make my own parts. So it was just painting. I never really got into it. I can't say that. Hello, Mark. The books from DeFalco's era were pretty villain of the month from what I remember. Forgettable. Maybe. Atlantis Attacks? Yeah. Did Infinity Gauntlet happen under his tenure? I wonder. If it did, then that's definitely a feather in the cap. Yeah, you're right. I think it did. I don't know if the whole trilogy did, but it definitely got going under him. I think you guys are right. Let's see. Here's another piece of news. This one's kind of funny to me. Yeah. So, back in 2015, there was a lawsuit against Marvel Comics filed by the publishers of an indie label called Horizon Comics. They claimed that Marvel stole the design for Iron Man 3 from their comic, and I might mispronounce it, but it was called something like Radix. And yeah, that one took a long time to get seen and heard by a judge. But in 2019, they threw it out of court. And obviously, I'm not here to like root for the big guy, but I saw it and I was like, no, I think Adi Granov created the designs, very independently, and the films used Adi Granov's designs for, they didn't use your comic. I just don't believe it. So you'd think, okay, they tried, they didn't succeed, done, right? No, they've come back with another lawsuit, this time from their home city of Montreal, Canada. So it can be tried again because it's in another country. They're suing Marvel again. This time they're saying that the designs for Ant-Man were taken from that same comic. And they've got examples. And I'll be honest, guys, to me it looks like some pretty generic stuff where you're sort of like exaggerating musculature but turning it into armor. I just don't see it. I just don't see it. No, I did not submit my repainted figures to Wizard Mag. But I do think that this case is kind of funny. You might want to like look it up yourself. Maybe you'll disagree with me. But look up Horizon Comics versus Marvel. There's news from, like I say, 2015, 2019, and now today. I think that they just are going after somebody with big pockets. I really do. That's what I'm sort of sensitive to. If I thought that like Marvel had stolen designs from somebody, I'd be like, yeah, get that bag, secure them bags. But I just don't personally see it. So we'll see what happens with this lawsuit. I'd love to see if anybody else has kept up with this story, if you agree with me, or if you think I'm being a jerk and you're like, yeah, these guys have money coming to them. Maybe they do, but I don't see it personally. Let's see. Andy Park designed those Ant-Man costumes. Did he? I don't know who designed them, to be honest. DeFalco got Mark Schultz, Al Williamson to do Flash Gordon 2-issue series. Al Williamson. Underrated. Underrated. Great artist. I'll tell you, one thing I'd love to get someday, but it's kind of goes for a pretty penny, is the Al Williamson illustrated issues of Marvel Comics adaptation of Empire Strikes Back. Just looks really cool to me. Those two costumes in particular are fairly generic, though. Well, I don't think that the Iron Man one is necessarily that generic. I mean, the redesign by Adi Granov, I think, definitely changed the look of Iron Man, but I don't think there's necessarily a ton to Iron Man. They're specifically saying, the helmet. But I just don't really see it. I see it as a pretty clear evolution of Ant-Man's original helmet that just needed a little more detail for a movie, for a big budget movie. Kind of hard. Yeah. Marvel totally stole my original and not copied character, Slide Wilson. Oh, what is it? What do I have? I have an episode where there's a commenter, and I'm not trying to throw him under the bus, but I'm trying to remember the video. I think it's my second one on Rob Liefeld. Something like episode 100 or so of my show, where there's a guy that claims that he actually created Deadpool and that Marvel somehow got a hold of it and stole the idea from him. And yeah, and I'm like, he's never like sued Marvel, but he says that he like always could. I'm like, sounds like you should if you sincerely believe that Marvel took your idea. And he's like, and I can prove it. It's kind of some funny reading. It's a little amusing. Those Radix designs look nothing like Ant-Man or Iron Man. I didn't really see it, to be honest. I think it's like, yeah. After reading Marvel Comics The Untold Story, I support anyone suing Marvel. Okay. Yeah, like I say, I don't want to do... I don't want to always be on, like, the big guy's side. That would be crazy. I own all Deathstroke ripoffs. Exactly, no. I mean, I think when you look at Deadpool, especially his first appearance or two, he looks a lot like Spider-Man, and he was named... Like, and there's also a lot of visual similarities and name stuff he's a parody of Deathstroke. He's a parody of Deathstroke and Spider-Man in his first. So I don't think that anyone has a really good case of they stole that idea. He's evolved. I would call Deadpool an example of a character that sort of evolved into what he is now. I don't think he came fully baked, you know? I don't think Superman came into the world fully baked. I think that it took stuff like his radio show and his comic strips to really give Superman, all the sort of characteristics and definition of who he really is. I think a lot of characters are not born fully formed. And I think that Deadpool is an example of that. I think it took him a while to sort of become who we know. Like having armor covering a human is going to have panels. Exactly, and those panels basically represent musculature. I just noticed that the severed head of Optimus Prime, you'd think it'd be bigger. I don't know. Death's head originally was like, you know, the size of a Transformer, and then he got shrunk in his future appearances. But here, let me clean up some of my pencil work, and I'll pick up the next piece of news while I do that. Yeah, Death's head was originally pretty big himself. I think he can even change size these days. Oh, here's a cool piece of news that I'm just mentioning because it's an artist that I really, really love. Daniel Warren Johnson announced his next comic, and it's something he's doing at Image. It's another creator-owned book. Oh, folks, this seems so cool to me. Daniel Warren Johnson loves comics, but he also loves pro wrestling. If you look at him on his channel or on his social media, he loves talking about pro wrestling. Cool. Everybody should have things that they're passionate about that. Well, he's finally doing a comic that's actually about, like, wrestling. And it's called Do a Power Bomb. It's at Image, like I say. I believe it starts in June. 7 issues. But it looks gorgeous. He's already put some pages up. It's, you know, cosmic, supernatural people wrestling. It's the story of a female wrestler whose mother was like basically the all-time greatest wrestler, and she's got to live up to her mom's legacy. Those are always good stories for somebody to debut in. All I can say is it looks over the top, it looks fun, and if you're doing a comic about something you're passionate about, that passion is going to shine through. You can't just try to do what's popular and go like, I think that this is what people want, because that's never going to work. It's never going to work. Well, okay, it could, but you're going to be, it's a rare case where that works. Let's put it that way. Instead, you gotta do what you're passionate about, because if you're passionate about it, there's an excellent chance other people are also passionate about it, and that's going to shine through. That's my opinion. I truly believe that. So anyway, I think it sounds like a really fun idea. We shall see. But I'm excited about it. You know, what can I say? I'm in the bag for certain creators. I love them until I don't. They got to give me a really good reason not to love them. You know, when Dark Knight 2 came out, I was still ride or die for Frank Miller. He'd done so much good stuff that I was like, well, I don't think I love it, but it must be me. I must be missing something. It takes a lot to get me to sort of say, nah, I'm not into that. Some super chats here. Let's acknowledge them. Andrew Jefferson, how much would we need to donate to get you to do a power bomb on camera? Well, you mean take a power bomb or give a power bomb? Because either way, somebody's getting tremendously injured, so we're talking in the millions to cover the medical bills there. Lord Luke Lightbringer says, how did a rip-off character like Deadpool become bigger than an original character like Deathstroke? That's an excellent question. And I would say that it was because he eventually started to offer something different. Deathstroke is a fantastic villain, and I would argue he's still very, very popular. Deadpool became more interesting when it became a bit of a comedy character. Like, they didn't just say that he made quips, they had him break the fourth wall. So I would say that it's really the writers over the years who have made Deadpool what he is. And that's not to take away from any artists, because you have to also have good artwork or somebody's going to bail. It's a visual medium, comics is. So I'm just saying that that's what made him unique, and apparently that was enough that hadn't been done before, that led to people just saying, yeah, I want more of this. I want more Deadpool talking directly to me. I think people started to feel a connection. I'll tell you who should answer that question. YouTuber Godzilla Mendoza. He loves Deadpool. He knows him. He knows that history a lot better than me. That's a question for him. How did Deadpool become more popular than Deathstroke? It's an interesting question. Daniel says, I agree with Chris about passion when it comes to creating stories. Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. Just in the sense that if you try to chase a trend, you could be late. You probably will be if you try to chase a trend. But if you're passionate about your idea and it has good execution, people will respond to that. They will. That's it. I gotta just find a way to carve out some time and write my story. I've got it pretty much mapped out. I just need to script it all the way through to make sure everything lines up properly. I've got plenty of ideas, but an idea is useless until you actually sit down and execute it. But my trick is I keep saying this is important to me. I want to write some of my own comics, and then I just cannot find the time to do it to my satisfaction. I'm a bit of a perfectionist sometimes. Not all the time, but sometimes, and it can really delay things. I've saved up enough that I think I can afford a good artist, and I've got a cool idea that I don't think has been done before. It's a horror book that I don't feel has been something that's been done in comics a whole lot. We'll see. MF, that's what I was just talking about. MF says, did I see Daniel Warren Johnson's announcement for Do a Powerbomb? That's what I was just talking about. Nice ring you got there. That's my fiance. My wife, Chrissy and I have been engaged a while. Sorry, Chrissy, I just said fiance, but I caught myself. I am now married, and I am proud of my wedding band. I got myself this. It's that is the Mandalorian. I don't know. I just wanted something that was a little different than everybody else's ring. Am I going to do color on this one? I'm sorry that it lagged out, MF. No worries. Yeah, no, I don't have time to color it, I don't think, tonight. No, I don't know. Maybe I'll do a little, grayscaling. I would say that Deadpool became more popular than Deathstroke due to Deadpool being more fun juvenile than Deathstroke. Before I even go further, there's a point to that, Eric. You're right. Deathstroke, he has been a protagonist in his own stories. But, there's a reason those didn't last forever. He's deeper than some villains, but he hasn't necessarily been given enough internal conflict to move him forward as a protagonist. And he's very dark. He's deathly serious. And I think that it's a lot more easy for readers to relate to a character that's a bit more fun. I think that that's just the way it is, no matter what, That's part of what makes Superman fun and Spider-Man, and you got to remember there's a long period of time where Batman was also a lot more sort of fun and lighthearted. It all depends on not just the execution and who it's aimed at, but what's going on in the world at the same time. Like, who is that aimed at then? There's a lot to say about that. Just because Batman being like really serious these days, and has been for a long time, is popular right now, does not mean that he always will be. I think at some point, probably soon, people will have had so much of the way Batman is right now that they're going to want... They might be okay with more Batman, but they're going to want it different. They're going to want like a return to sort of the funny Batman from the 50s and from the 1960s live action show. I feel like that's inevitable, that at some point that will happen. Didn't Deadpool play a part in the death of Maddie Franklin? I don't know. Wasn't that one of the Spider-Girl characters? I don't know. I couldn't say. Cool question. Don't have a cool answer. I know what to mention. I did an interview that went up live today on the website comicbookmovie.com. The writer was very polite and friendly, and he'd already gotten Scott from NerdSync to agree to do an interview, and he wanted to talk to a second comic book YouTuber. He was willing to work with my schedule, and so I said yes. And I think it is an interesting look if you're curious about, what is it like to try to do this as a career. That's really what it gets into. Like, what is it like to try to do YouTube as a career, and specifically for comics? What are the pitfalls? What are the successes? What have I learned? So if you're curious, I recommend checking out comicbookmovie.com, and it has an interview today with me and Scott from NerdSync. It's pretty lengthy, so it's pretty in-depth, just so you know, depending on what kind of time you have. But maybe you could learn something from it if you're curious. I opened up quite a bit. Hold on 2 seconds. Steve Sorensen just shot a super chat. I always want to acknowledge those. And he says, Soups is better than Bats. Grant Morrison convinced me of this. I think it's all about the execution, but I think we'd have to acknowledge there'd be no Batman without Superman. Not specifically. It was a derivative character. Even though it's pretty different, it was created because Superman was popular. That's Bob Kane's whole thing, is he saw that Superman was selling, and he's like, yeah, I can create a superhero. And he did. I'm sure somebody else would have created something, but, it was Batman. And but I think that there's something to be said there. Superman really launched things in a big way. He's a very important character in comics history. Very important. And he is cool. I really want to do an episode someday about All-Star Superman. Just one of my favorite comics. Just beautiful. Just beautiful. We'll see. Batong says, I've been a fan of your channel for a long time. That's nice of you. I wanted to say congratulations on making YouTube videos full-time, getting sponsors, and getting married. Yeah, I guess a lot has happened this year for me. That's thank you. Thank you very much. That's kind of you. What else do I have here for brushes? Gotta have one that's bigger. Favorite Moon Knight run? My favorite is probably Jeff Lemire's run. I think that If I'm remembering, what, Jeff Lemire and Declan Shalvey? I think that's the one I ended up liking the most. Warren Ellis also did some cool stuff with the character, actually. And art-wise, you know, both Bill Sienkiewicz and Greg Smallwood, boy. Yeah, that is the interesting thing to me about Moon Knight, is that because he's never been that popular, a lot of creators have been able to swing for the fences with the type of story they want to tell with him, and Marvel has let them. And that's led to a more interesting character. Sometimes it can lead to complete chaos, but I don't think it really has for Moon Knight. Instead, it's added depth. Rumor has it Bob Kane plagiarized stuff. Yeah. That is the rumor. That is the rumor. I'm not a huge fan of Bob Kane. Just not. I can acknowledge that he contributed, at least in some part, to a very important character. But the exact amount he did, I can't be sure of, because of how bad he was at stealing credit. You know? I think, ironically, if he had been a better person and shared that credit, we'd probably remember him even better these days. Because we'd know specifically what he added. Yeah, the Sienkiewicz covers for Moon Knight, so good. That, you know, Moon Knight is where you see Bill Sienkiewicz blossom as an artist. He started off as a Neil Adams clone, and he was a good one. He drew very much like Neil Adams, which was a good thing at the time. But he very, very quickly started doing his own thing, especially on those covers. And it's really cool to see an artist just come into his own kind of so quickly and confidently. I mean, he really changes his art approach. It's just amazing. Just amazing. What else are we talking about? I believe Matt Groening is the Bob Kane of The Simpsons. I don't think you can say that, because obviously Matt Groening did Life is Hell for quite a long time before Simpsons ever came around, which means we know his sensibilities and art style. And you see that in The Simpsons on the Tracy Ullman Show and in the first couple of seasons. Now, did those characters evolve past, you know, Matt Groening's sensibilities? Absolutely they did. But, you know, fortunately for all involved, TV is, you know, got everybody's credits there. But he did create it, so, you know, he gets that executive producer credit and stuff, and that's just TV. Just my 2 cents. I used to really like Life is Hell. I thought that was a pretty funny comic. Now, of course, I did read it when I was a lot younger. It's been a long time since I read it. But I remember really liking it when I was younger. Lord Luke Lightbringer with another super chat. That's so generous of you, dude. I think it means I've seen Supergirl and Power Girl in comic books, animated, and live-action TV series and movies, but I haven't heard much about Superwoman. That's true. Yeah. There's not as much to say about that character, though, to be honest. You know, yeah, there's just not as much to say, I don't think. And honestly, even if there was, DC's always had Wonder Woman, so, you know, you if you're going to create a super powerful female character, I don't think they want to take anything away from what Wonder Woman is. There can be other superheroes, obviously, but yeah, I think that they've always sort of been careful about protecting Wonder Woman as sort of their main female character. Interesting observation. This is the first time I've been able to join this live. Thanks for doing this. Love your videos. Oh, thanks for being here, Marcus. That's so nice of you. Oh, cool. You're reading Daredevil and looking at Gene Colan's art. Yeah. Is there an episode's worth of interesting stuff about Colan? Absolutely. Absolutely. He's had an interesting career. And if you have gone down that path, Marcus, and you like his artwork, and I also have grown to really like his artwork the older I've gotten, look at his Tomb of Dracula run. He drew every issue of Tomb of Dracula. It's really suited to his sensibilities. Like that sort of more, not sketchy, but like more illustrative style with just the unique way that he does hatching and stuff like that. Dark, moody, ominous environments and stuff. Just really well suited for Tomb of Dracula. So, yeah, that's a recommendation. Are you going to check out the upcoming Astro City book? Possibly, but I really have never read all of Astro City, so I kind of need to start at the beginning for that guy. You know? Trying to think of who else art-wise I want to talk about. I don't know. I'm sort of blanking. The next episode I do for Comic Tropes, I won't tell you exactly what it is, but it's going to be sort of looking at a not great comic and why it didn't work. Not just sort of, haha, it's bad. That doesn't necessarily interest me, although, of course, I do enjoy making jokes about a comic that has made some questionable decisions. I do enjoy that, I'm not going to lie. But it's an interesting case study of like, well, this company had another character that was kind of similar. Why did that other one work and this one didn't at all? Just so yeah, I think I've got sort of a funny episode that'll still like hopefully have something to say. We'll see. I think you'll like it. Aren't they releasing a reprint of Astro City? That would be nice. It's Busiek's best? Okay. Well, I do like Busiek. I think he's a very talented writer. I generally really like what he creates. So I've always been interested. It's just that, like Astro City just came out at a time where I was like, I just didn't start picking it up, and then I just felt like, oh, there's so much to read, but now that I sort of consider this more like, something I'm doing as a job, I don't mind carving out the time to just read, Just sit down and read and be like, yeah, like, maybe this is a little work, but it's fun work, so I can, like, really, like, motivate myself to, like, just power through and, like, I'm not reading purely for fun, I tell myself sometimes. Like I'm trying to look at it with a critical eye. It's not Neil Adams' Skate Man. That might be a fun thing to talk about someday. Weird comic, but no, not this one. Hey, kitty. Want to come here? If I make that sound, he usually comes to see me. He just sort of knows. Does anybody else in here enjoy Death's Head at all? Or, on a related note, comics that he's been in, like Doctor Who or Transformers? Just curious if If that's anybody's speed. Oh, I saw a cool movie that I want to recommend, but it's not going to be for everybody out there because it is a horror movie, and I know not everybody's super into horror. I like horror a lot. I just do. Oh man, was this one cool. It's called X, and it's set in 1979 in Texas, where a group of 6 people go to film a porn movie on a farm. They're renting a place out there. And then things go bad. It becomes a slasher movie. But I would say that it's like, even though, like, you know, it's in Texas and it's on a farm and it's a slasher, it is not a ripoff of, say, Texas Chainsaw Massacre. It's a lot more, it's got characters that are built up way, way better than any of those. Oh man, was it good. It like made you care about all the characters. It took its time building everything out, building the tension, and then like once things got kicked into gear in the final act, oh my god, was it intense. I thought it was so good. It way surpassed my expectations. Way surpassed. Chrissy says my Transformers is my favorite comic of all time. I don't believe you on that one. I don't believe you. I too saw X, and there will be a prequel next year. I know. Yeah, there's so much that I want to sort of say about it, but like I don't want to spoil it. All I can say is it's a good movie. If you are looking for a horror movie, X is good. It's so good. Just my opinion, but it gets the Comic Tropes seal of approval. Sort of said that like Casey Kasem. Anybody remember him? Getting him down. Number 9. Number 9. Let's see. One of my college professors assigned Astro City as part of a comic books and religion course. Oh, that's interesting. Okay. There's a funny Peter David Hulk issue with Death's Head in it, I think. Really? Was there? There probably was, but I don't remember that, Lima. The only comic with Death's Head that I ever read was What If, about him, written by Simon Furman and drawn by Jeff Sr. Yeah. Is X only in theaters? I believe right now it is. So, yeah, it's interesting. Death's Head, like I said earlier, owned by Marvel, created by writer Simon Furman and artist Jeff Sr. But at the last minute, like, Jeff Sr. was like, wait a minute. If we just create this in the Transformers comic as like a villain in there, it's going to be owned by Hasbro. We're allowed to like use things that we've created other places in there though. So let's actually just quickly do, an issue of something else that has him in it so that Marvel owns the character, not Hasbro. And I can, use him some more. And so they did a quick, I forget what comic it appeared in, but there was a 1-page story with Death's Head, like, rushed out just before the Transformers issue. And that had artwork by Brian Hitch, who was only something like 17 or 18, maybe probably 18, but like really young, in other words, like, and still a very talented artist. Yeah. It's just an interesting little piece of history there. Wasn't he Shaggy too? Yeah. Casey Kasem was Shaggy in Scooby-Doo, Cliffjumper in Transformers. He left Transformers in season 3. He stopped doing the voices. He did a couple characters, I think, beyond just Cliffjumper. When they made like a really, in my opinion, kind of racist joke, they said that like the Decepticons went to the Middle East to a country called Carbamia. Well, Casey Kasem was Libyan. He's like, you got to change that or I'm leaving. And they're like, no, we wouldn't change that. This is a great gag. And he's like, cool, see ya. Which I don't blame him for at all. It's like pretty terrible. Ugh. I can even remember, just because I was such a fan of Transformers as a little kid, like that episode. And it wasn't good at all. It was dumb. Like, why would you risk losing one of your top voice actors, like one of the few people with like name recognition because he's like got a radio show. Why would you risk losing that for such a stupid joke? Yeah, I agree, Robert Weichel. Ty West has done some really great horror. House of the Devil was good at building slow tension. So was The Innkeepers. Casey Kasem was Robin. That's right. That's right. On was it Super Friends or was it like something that took place after that? But he did do Robin from Batman and Robin. Yeah, Black Phoenix. That's what they did. It's an episode that, like, from season 3 that stars, I want to say, Octane, one of the bad guy triple changers. Yeah. It'll be interesting to see who all the Transformers cross over with once their new acquisition takes place. Has anybody crossed over with more properties? Probably. What have the Transformers crossed over with? Death's Head, G.I. Joe, Spider-Man. What else? I guess in more recent years they did some crossovers too, didn't they? Like Star Trek and something else. My Little Pony? I don't know. But I think there's got to be somebody out there that's crossed over with more. I don't know. Well, no, I guess I've still got some time that I'll keep going for a little while. I've slowed way down. I'm having trouble figuring out certain things on this, like, you know, how I want to make the cape look and what I want to do for, like, his legs and stuff. I'm having trouble with it. I didn't have time to sketch this one out as much as some other times when I do my show. But let me at least spot some more blacks, put in a few more details in some key areas, and try to have a little more fun with this drawing before I call it a show. Yeah, so some pretty big news. Definitely some big money spent. God, over $2.4 million for a comic book. Good Lord. There's a couple of Death's Head issues in Iron Man 2020. Hitch did the pencils. Yeah. Transformers meets Back to the Future. Didn't Circuit Breaker show up in mainstream Marvel Comics? Did she? I don't remember Circuit Breaker showing up in mainstream Marvel Comics. I guess it's possible. There's got to be somebody that's crossed over with more things than Transformers, right? But you are right that they've had a lot of sort of like one-shot novelty things where they've crossed over. But I feel like by that logic, maybe Star Trek or something like that has as well. Because Star Trek's crossed over with plenty of things. So, yeah, I don't know. Maybe, geez, interesting. Maybe Transformers has crossed over with more things than anybody else. Comic tropes has become a heavy habit of mine recently. Oh, that's so nice of you. That's so nice. This is the first time I see your live transmission. Well, welcome, Lima. I appreciate you having you here. It means a lot. Thank you. Yeah, hard at work, keeping up with the weekly schedule and doing these weekly shows, but I'm having a good time, folks. I am. I really like doing this. I like it a lot. I think the character John Munch has the world record for crossovers. All right, so John Munch, you're right. Started in Homicide, obviously crossed over with all the Law and Orders, X-Files, Sesame Street, Arrested Development. What else did John Munch cross over with? But that's a lot. Like, what other TV characters crossed over that much? Law and Order, Arrested Development, X-Files, Sesame Street. It's at least 4 other shows beyond what he started on. That's a lot for a character. Suppose technically Saint Elsewhere has crossed over more than anything in the non-direct sense. Right, yeah, there's that whole idea of how all the shows technically take place within Saint Elsewhere's universe. Because, yeah, that's a rabbit hole you could go down, for sure. If you want to say any crossover is sort of canon and stuff like that. Worst, or at least funniest, crossover for a TV show I have ever seen was Webster, the sitcom about the little adopted kid, and Star Trek The Next Generation. Wow. Wow. That was a thing. Webster's final episode had him visit the Starship Enterprise when a lightning storm hit his computer. And you're thinking, well, it's all in his head, right? No, he ends up transported back to his home, and he's got a piece of the Starship Enterprise to remember his adventure by. Munch was on The Wire and The Shield? Really? I didn't know he was on those two shows. Circuit Breaker was in Marvel's Secret Wars 2. Ugh. Let's not remember that Secret Wars 2 exists. The Saint Elsewhere connection is due to Munch and Homicide: Life on the Streets due to a Saint Elsewhere doctor showing up on Homicide. Oh my god, I didn't know about that. Homicide: Life on the Streets is a very underrated show, and I say underrated only since that, like, always critically acclaimed, did well. You know, it was on network TV for a number of seasons, but not a lot of people remember it. But if you ever want to see a good procedural, I strongly recommend Homicide: Life on the Streets, by the same guy that did create The Wire. So I'm not surprised that it has some connections. All set in Baltimore. Man, I remember, I'll never forget, like, an episode where a man has been pushed in front of a train, like a subway train, and he got pinned between the subway tracks and, like, the platform. And the police get there to investigate it, and they find out that, like, his bottom half has basically been severed, and the only reason he's still alive is because he, like, all the arteries are temporarily, like pinched closed. As soon as they try to move him or move the train, he's gonna die almost instantly. So they've got to, like, use what knowledge he can, like, share before he dies, and the police are also desperately trying to find his estranged daughter before he dies. Oh my god, it was so creepy. Yeah, Robin Williams was in it, Bruce Campbell. Just a good show. In your interview with Kyle Higgins, you mentioned that every 10 years there is a young superhero that captures the zeitgeist. Have you thought about going into greater detail on them? Not necessarily, but it might not be a bad idea. It's just sort of a pet theory I have when I sort of noticed roughly every 10 years there seemed to be a young hero that came out, because I was like, well, 60s was definitely Spider-Man. 70s, I would argue, was Nova. I'm not 100% sure off the top of my head what I would say for the 80s, but the 90s was Spider-Man again with Ultimate Comics. It's at least a Marvel thing. I don't know if it's everybody. And then, like, somewhere in the 2000s, I think it's just sort of became like, in the 2000s, Miles Morales Spider-Man, and then, like, the 2010s, Invincible, and the 2020s, Radiant Black. That's just my take, but maybe we can go back further, and maybe, like, before the 60s, like, was Superboy the 50s? It might be that, like, roughly every 10 years, there's a popular young superhero, and that's probably just that it's connecting with new current readers, I believe. 40s is Robin, probably. Yeah. 90s was definitely Quasar? No, Quasar's too old. No, it wasn't Quasar. I read Quasar when it was coming out, and the best thing I can say about Quasar was, it helped give Greg Capullo his break. So that's a good thing. And I like Mark Grunwald as a writer. I do. So, I stuck with it. That was definitely a meat and potatoes superhero type thing. Firestorm was a big teen hero in the 1980s. That's true. That's true. 2010s also had Kamala Khan. Kamala's great. That's true. Shazam. 50s might be Captain Marvel if you count Billy Batson as the young part. Captain Marvel's more 40s, though. Actually, I would say that, Captain Marvel maybe more than Robin. Robin is popular, but Captain Marvel was super popular. Yeah, I think that Captain Marvel might be the best example of the popular young superhero, like the first really popular one, because he was coming out like a notch after Superman and Batman. Just a hair. I think the 40s would be Captain Marvel. Steve Sorensen uses a super chat to vote Kamala Khan 2010s. Probably. She did hit pretty big. I mean, yeah. Have you played Elder Scrolls Skyrim? I haven't. And what do you think about the game's lore? Do you think it will make for a great comic series? Is it confirmed that they're turning it into a comic series? If so, cool. I know it's popular, so it probably would work. Again, always about the execution. But no, I haven't played it. I had a roommate that played one of the Elder Scrolls games, but that was back in the year 2000. In the year 2000. Supreme Omega with a super chat. Question. Do you think the Clone Saga could have been a decent story if the marketing department hadn't interfered and if it arrived at a better time in Marvel? Absolutely. Absolutely. I definitely think that there's, because there are some good issues in there, I think, and the fact that, Scarlet Spider has come back, Ben Reilly has come back, I think indicates that there is interest in the idea. It's just that, they dragged it on too long, and they made characters think that all the adventures that they'd faced with Peter Parker were somehow invalidated. And you need to sort of, assure people that no, that stuff still matters, your time wasn't wasted by following these characters. So I do agree that it was the marketing that, sort of botched that. It was, I think that the Clone Saga could have been executed better. It couldn't have been executed a whole lot worse, in my opinion. The Clone Saga is very much something that made me get out of reading comics every week for a while. I got really burnt out on it. I loved Spider-Man, and reading all that stuff and just feeling like I was getting jerked back and forth, it made me sort of get out of comics for, not completely out of comics, but getting regular weekly comics. It made me get out of that for a while, for a couple years. 90s was Darkhawk. I mean, by that rationale, in the 90s, I could say Speedball, or I could say Danny Ketch Ghost Rider. I don't think any of those quite caught on big enough that you could say that they were the zeitgeist, that they were the cultural touchstone. Maybe you could argue New Warriors overall, but by that, we're sort of getting back to, where does Teen Titans fall? Actually, wait a minute. I did say that, I had trouble figuring out what the 80s was. The 80s probably was, that was when Robin and eventually Nightwing was at its peak. Yeah, Teen Titans was humongous. Teen Titans would have been, the sort of teen heroes, but, the teen hero for the time. And Robin was definitely the star of that book. So I would say that, yeah, Dick Grayson was the 80s. Nova was the 70s. Robin / Nightwing was the 80s. Yeah. Interesting. 90s was Super Pro. Who are my favorite artists these days? That's a fun one. There's a bunch these days. I'll get anything Daniel Warren Johnson does. He's excited me a lot lately. Dan Mora is a more recent artist that I seem to really like. Sean Gordon Murphy. Well, maybe he's not necessarily as new, but yeah, he's an artist that I'm still excited about. Who else am I excited about that's still working today? I'm looking at comics that I have here. Naoki Urasawa. Anything Naoki Urasawa does, I get. I love his work. Love it. Love it. Yeah, I agree that the X-Men was insanely popular in the 80s, but I'm sort of talking about how usually there's sort of one teen hero that captures the zeitgeist every 10 years or so. Um, I don't know. I'd have to think about that a little. It's not clean. It's just sort of more of a pet theory that I've mulled around. There's certainly examples of characters coming in. I think Spider-Man was, he was the 60s. I think that Spider-Man, again, for the Ultimate Comics line, and then again for Miles Morales. I think that those are really big, popular characters. Yeah, people are saying Jorge Jimenez. Wow, what a talented artist. I'll definitely be picking up his work when he starts on Batman. I will. Chris Samnee? No question. Static Shock? Yeah, Static Shock actually did make a bit of an impact in the 90s. That's a good point. Ninja Turtles for the 80s. Interesting thing there, Dr. Wolfman. The Ninja Turtles. Certainly by the mid 80s they were like, but we keep coming up with like teams, and my original idea was more that there's always sort of like a solo character, and I don't know if it's clean enough to make this argument. I don't know if it's clean enough to say that. There's always a teen team. I have made an episode about how there's always a teen team. How Kirby created that with characters like the Boy Commandos, Newsboy Legion. We got teams like New Mutants, New Warriors, New Teen Titans, TMNT, and how all of these essentially have at least sort of like 4 to 5, and honestly the original X-Men by Kirby and Lee, they always have the leader, the brains, the muscle, and sort of the wise ass. And you see like that as like they're all, those roles are always in the teen team. And sometimes there's sort of a fifth member, which is like the heart of the team, sort of the emotional and stuff like that. And a lot of times then they have the adult leader. For like the Newsboy Legion, the Guardian watched out for them. For the X-Men, there was Professor X, etc. There's usually the responsible adult. So I made an episode about that that I definitely believe in. James Stokey, Trad Moore, yeah, they're very compelling artwork. Very compelling. Had a rare day off work and just got back from my first date. Ooh, glad I could catch a bit of the live show. Thank you. Thank you for joining us. TMNT seems to recapture every generation with each new animated series. They've had a lot of successful adaptations, haven't they? Eduardo Risso, 100 Bullets, Moonshine. Eduardo Risso is really talented, and I'd love to talk more about Argentinian artists at some point. I'm pretty sure he's Argentinian, if I remember correctly. Yeah, I'm about to take off too, James. James Stewart saying he's about to take off. I've had a lot of fun. Let's see, Supreme Omega with a super chat. I love answering those. Do you feel Milestone is the 90s version of 60s Marvel? No, I wouldn't quite say that, because Marvel, like, really captured a lot more attention and dollars and wallets and eyeballs. Milestone is great, it's really cool what Milestone accomplished, but it also didn't last that long, and the only lasting characters are Static. Static is a great character, and to a lesser degree Icon. The others didn't really seem to have lasting power behind them. But it was a great time with a lot of great creators producing some interesting books that were definitely more relevant to the times. I have nothing really bad to say about Milestone. I just don't think it captured the audience the same way that 1960s Marvel did. I don't think it's quite the same now. Later on, they had the girl. Yeah, like a lot of times there will be a female member that's sort of the heart of the team, but sometimes it's just somebody that's a foil to the other roles that haven't been filled. But there's usually 4 to 5 members on the teen team, and you can like really slot those characterizations onto anybody. The leader, the muscle, the hothead, and the brains. And sometimes those characteristics might be, like, two characteristics might be shared on one character, and that creates sort of a role for another person to just play a foil in a slightly different way. But most of the time, when it's a teen team, those roles are always filled. Chris, I think you were onto something, but I think you need to more thoroughly define the role that the character occupied. Oh, I definitely do. I don't have this very, like, well thought out. It was more just like a vague idea that I was talking about with the Kyle Higgins interview that I've never really explored. So it's interesting to talk it out. Like, you know, that this is interesting to see who fills that. But you're right. I have to define it a little bit more. Sales-wise, Marvel wasn't great during the 60s. Well, it wasn't the same as what DC was doing, but it was leagues above what they had been doing throughout the 50s. And they just had a lot of momentum, which really just kept growing. You know, like, say they were like here in the 50s. In the 60s with superheroes, they started here, and then it kept going up. Now, DC was probably up here, you know, but at a certain point, Marvel overtook them. Good point. Good point. But, like, they had the momentum. Legion of superheroes. Often there's a wild card, too. The wild card is sort of what I usually mean by, like, you know, the hothead or the sarcastic one, the jokester. If I'm going to say this, like, you know, okay, we'll use TMNT. Leonardo leads, Donatello does machines. But then in the comics, usually, in most of the cartoons, Michelangelo is sort of the comic relief, the funny one, and then Raphael is usually the muscle. Usually. Now, every once in a while, they've played with that in different iterations. But I think I'm going to wrap it up here. I didn't quite finish this, but, you know, we saw what I was going for. And, hey, how many people draw Death's Head fan art? Like, not a ton, but it's an interesting character if you've never looked into him. He's crossed over with a lot of interesting stuff. Transformers. This was going to be like some of the TARDIS down here if I had more time. Maybe draw, like, you know, Fantastic Four or Iron Man somewhere back there. Sosum Grande, Chris. Thank you. Casey Jones is wild card. Maybe, yeah. That's not a bad take on things. But I'm gonna take off all. I had a really fun time. I gotta put some serious work into the next episode because I do have a sponsored ad that I have to create and have to get that approved ASAP. So we'll get that done. Thank you all for being here. Thank you for the super chats. Always nice of you. But thank you also for the questions and the comments. Wow. I wasn't doing that to get extras, but probably you guys shot that before I said it. Chris Sears says, take care, stay safe. You as well. And Riv Wilson from Australia says, good work. Well, thank you. I had a lot of fun with the episode that just came out yesterday. The variants and gimmick covers. Just a fun bit of comic book history to look at. Add one droplet of color before you sign off. Well, you can't say no to the wife. My wife. There we go. A little color. Keep reading comics. Thank you all. It was fun. You guys really make my week. I have a great time talking to everybody here. It's always fun to talk about comics. Go over the news. Go over the comics that I read. Hopefully we all got some recommendations from each other. I will see you soon. You'll see me sooner because Comic Tropes will come out before the next live stream. But until then, keep reading comics. Take care.